We interrupt your regularly scheduled broadcast for this news update.
Hi, Lancecast the newscaster here. Welcome back to a brand new episode of This Just In. This just in! After 2 long years, Nintendo has finally announced a long-awaited sequel to Pokemon Colosseum, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. Are
you shitting me?
A continuation of the original story and is slated to come out later this year.
Are you kidding me? Get out of my shot!
Sequels are a wonderful thing. When you spend countless amount of hours roaming through a world, experiencing all that it has to offer, it's only natural that you'd want to engross yourself in a new chapter to the story. So when a game does well enough to warrant a sequel, it's safe to say the fans are going to get excited.
And that's exactly what happened to me the first time that I saw this game. I absolutely loved the first one with its darker storyline and its double battle strategies, including the inventive mechanic of being able to steal other trainers' Pokemon. So with this game coming out 2 years later and at the end of the GameCube's life cycle, we were sure to get an upgrade, right? Right?
Pokemon Orre XD Uwu What's This Gale of Darkness released on August 4th, 2005 for the Nintendo GameCube, and I absolutely love this game. The story elements, the more polished assets, double the locations, double the shadow Pokemon, being able to catch wild Pokemon. Okay, we'll get back to that in a bit, while still being completely compatible with the Game Boy and a direct sequel to its predecessor. Pokemon XD takes place 5 years after the events of Pokemon Colosseum and starts out with this dark foreboding title screen. The dark clouds looming in the background, the menacing Lugia taking the shape of the D.
God, I am so excited. The original game was so dark and brooding. I cannot wait to see what this game has in store for me.
Until you get to the battle mode screen and hear the Latin thump of disco tunes. Yeah, before we dive into the single player mode, I just need to mention that the battle mode is about as bare bones as you can get here. In Pokemon Colosseum, we saw the Mount Battle 100 challenge, where you're tasked with making it all the way to the top while using your in-game team without the use of any items. However, this was stripped from Pokemon XD, and we're only left with this battle mode with a few randomly selected teams. That is good for some quick fun, I guess? I do appreciate how they brought back the very much necessary Game Boy connectivity battles, but a lot of this just feels lackluster and shoehorned in at the end.
You can play as a Jirachi!
But don't let that bother you, because now it's time for this fantastic single-player experience. Here we see this great opening cutscene involving the SS Libra, or as I like to call it, the modern-day Titanic, getting snatched out of the ocean by Shadow Lugia.
Which, I mean, technically we don't know that it's a Shadow Lugia, but I mean... come on.
What I find interesting is that James Turner, the current art director for Pokemon Sword and Shield, his first role was actually creating the concept art and opening cinematic for Gale of Darkness. So the same guy responsible for this precious, adorable little bean is also responsible for chucking 2 sailors into the ocean and lugging a ship through the air. Afterwards, we are introduced to...
what happened to my OG teenage vigilante?
This is Michael.
I mean, he does have my middle name.
A 13, or what I assume to be around that age, boy who lives in the Pokemon HQ Lab, a research facility dedicated to researching the Shadow Pokemon incident that occurred 5 years ago. Ring any bells? In charge is Professor Crane, who, like typical Pokemon fashion, succeeded your now deceased father. But don't you worry, you still always have your annoying little sister Jovi and your mother Lily, who looks like she's about to topple over from her massive. She is in no way, shape, or form related to this Lily from Pokemon Sun and Moon. The Pokemon HQ Lab is currently investigating the Purify Chamber, a brand new method of purifying Pokemon, and let me tell you, this thing is a major improvement than the everlasting grind in Pokemon Colosseum. The Purifying Chamber is basically a machine where Pokemon are separated into different slots, with non-Shadow Pokemon essentially dancing around Shadow Pokemon. The more super effective type matchups surround the Pokemon, the more effective Shadow Pokemon are effectively healed, creating the strategy of which Pokemon to purify first and which Pokemon to use in your team. Now in the beginning, this isn't very effective, but the more Pokemon you have in the Purifying Chambers, the quicker you're able to purify these shadows, while also allowing you to purify up to 9 at a time. Now returning back to the story, Pokemon XD does take a much lighter approach to its storytelling. We see our hero roaming around this beautiful research lab, visiting this kooky professor that reminds me way too much of Professor Agate from Luigi's Mansion, and of course coming back to see the professor getting abducted by Team Snagem. Oh damn it, they're back at it again. So of course we're gonna ask the 13-year-old kid to take down the criminal organization. Yeah, that's a fantastic idea.
You see, it's a little less unorthodox for a 17-year-old to be taking on the concept of theft, burglary, kidnapping, taking down a criminal syndicate organization. But I mean, sure, it's not like in the last game we had a 10-year-old taking on the concept of preventing natural disasters that could determine the fate of humanity. Well,
after Professor Crane gets kidnapped, we are let loose into the Orre region, with major upgrades to the areas we can explore, with some of these new locations being absolutely gorgeous. The first we're shown off is Gateon Port, immediately being thrust into this Jack Johnny Bravo looking hunk, showing off his shadow Pokemon in the middle of the street before he is pounced by an old man and his AIDS.
Suggestive jokes aside, they're doing a really good job of making this guy seem super nice. I'm sure this isn't a subtle implication to the primary villain whatsoever.
Just like the first game, this world is brimming with personality. Every NPC has something to say, even if it's not terribly important to the overall plot. Like this dude's just sitting over here singing sea shanties. I like these subtle personalities in video games. It doesn't affect the story, but it just makes the world feel more alive. Shadow Pokemon are here as well, and the slight changes start to make itself apparent as Shadow Pokemon have received a significant boost in power. Shadow Pokemon now have a specific set of moves for each Pokemon, rather than every Pokemon simply having Shadow Rush. These moves are all modeled after a standard common move that any Pokemon can learn. However, all Shadow-type Pokemon moves are super effective against non-Shadow Pokemon, and not very effective against their own kind. A nice balance, I seem to think. Calling in Hyper Mode still returns from the first game, but other than that, the game builds and improves upon many of the core aspects that Pokemon Colosseum laid down, and this is shown tremendously when we return back to Agate Village. Just looking at this town, you can see the improvements between the two titles, as this game feels much more vibrant and polished all around. It looks like many of the textures have been updated, and these water graphics, including the ones at Gateon port, look absolutely fantastic for the GameCube era, and they even updated the camera angle here. Also, since the purifying chamber hasn't been completed yet, you're still able to use the Relic Forest to purify your Pokemon. However, no Celebi. This was much needed, as in Pokemon Colosseum, it was almost halfway through the total number of Shadow Pokemon you encounter before you could purify your team. And as far as the Pokemon collection, in Colosseum, Dual Square allowed us 6 different Pokemon to choose from, with varying types depending on our own personal preference, while Pokemon XD has...
Alright, am I the only one who was bothered by the fact that they took all 6 primary colors of the rainbow, except they replaced orange with brown? Like, come on, this dude looks like an absolute shit stain.
But what it lacks in color, it makes up for in its Pokemon collection. Spheal, Houndour, Baltoy, Mareep, a much better addition than the ones in Pokemon Colosseum. Now, of course, all Pokemon are a preference. Everyone has their favorites, except for these 3. Nobody likes these. But much of Colosseum's inclusions were those that weren't in Ruby Sapphire and Fire Red or Leaf Green, which unfortunately leaves Pokemon Colosseum as basically the Game Boy game's table scraps. But Gale of Darkness also has Growlithe, so it's automatically better. It also helps that Gale of Darkness has 83 Shadow Pokemon as compared to Colosseum's 48. This meant that between Pokemon Colosseum and XD, you could find about a third of the total Pokemon available during Gen 3. The pacing of Gale of Darkness is much better as well. If you saw my previous video, I explained how Colosseum had a large problem with gaps in its levels, with times where it was absolutely necessary to grind or you'd be left behind. And this isn't a problem in Gale of Darkness, but that comes with the fact that if you fight every enemy in the game like I did, you end up massively over-leveled. I didn't really feel the need to grind any of my Pokemon at all, and the difficulty didn't feel on par with Pokemon Colosseum as well. Risk and reward, I guess, but that's probably due to the criticism that Pokemon Colosseum was excruciatingly difficult. And for the casual audience, I can definitely see that.
But now it's time for everybody's favorite part of the story, because Gale of Darkness has a lolly.
Here we meet Lavrina, the first Cipher admin of this game.
And I mean, I guess she's kind of cute. I mean, it's not like I bought her bathwater or anything.
Lavrina explains that Cipher is trying to create the perfect Shadow Pokemon, one that cannot have their hearts reverted back to normal and will stay permanently evil, which kind of explains a lot regarding the opening cutscene. By using Professor Crane's research, they will be able to create an army of Shadow Pokemon that will be able to be controlled so that Cipher can take over the world.
Like, you've got Lugia, a legendary Pokemon capable of taking a massive cruise ship and dropping it God knows where. You're telling me that a hyper beam to a government facility wouldn't get Cipher's point across? I mean, come on, your primary enemy is a 13-year-old kid and a vigilante that hasn't shown up in 5 years.
So with that being said, this is pretty much the primary basis of the game, rescuing the Shadow Pokemon alongside Shadow Lugia, codenamed XD001. See where the name of the title comes from? It is up to us to discover the whereabouts of Cipher's locations and the next step in their plan, which, honestly, the next step is one of the coolest plot points in video games I've ever seen. See, after mysterious happenings had been taking place in the desert between Pyrite Town and Finax City, rumors started spreading around regarding what it is. To investigate this, you seek the help of the ONBS News Organization, which turns out to be the Kids Grid members from Pokemon Colosseum. Cipher's plan turns out to be taking over their entire broadcast center, stealing all of their valuable information while imprisoning all of the members in Finax City underground. Meanwhile, Cipher members have disguised themselves as regular citizens and are impersonating an entire populated town of people without any sneaking suspicion from whatever government body is lazily running the Orre region. Meanwhile, the game asks you to go catch wild Pokemon.
That's right, the moment you've all been waiting for. I'm going to talk about the wild Pokemon in this game. But what if I said something positive about the wild Pokemon? No, I'm just kidding. Wild Pokemon suck in this game.
Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness introduces wild Pokemon encounters in the most rushed, last-minute method you could think of. This method of putting out bait to encounter a total of 9 different Pokemon, that's not an exaggeration. In my eyes, it's a joke, and I'd rather not even have it in the game in the first place. I feel like this was used as a selling point at the last minute, but it wasn't fully fleshed out since it was nearing the end of the GameCube's life cycle. The Pokemon Company more than likely wanted to push this out anyway, despite it not being fully implemented. This is pretty unfortunate, but to be fair, it does add additional slots for Pokemon and Mirror B encounters. Oh shit, he's back! Yep, our favorite Afro Pokeball Maniac returns, fit with new theme music and all. Mirror B can be encountered via the Mirror Radar, which allows you to encounter the illustrious wanderer that will have any of the Shadow Pokemon you might have missed your first go around. Now, in the first game, you'd have to go to the Snagem hideout and fight scattered NPCs to reclaim these Pokemon. And although I do love Mirror B, if you end up missing a good chunk of Pokemon, this can turn the post-game into a chore, having to wait for Mirror B to appear anytime you need to capture any Pokemon that you might have missed. Now, going back to Finax City, we end up saving the town and going on television to embarrass this clown. But now it's time for us to investigate the desert to find out what mystery lies in wait. But not without upgrading our bike first. Looks like we've got to go back to Professor E. Chopin's house and
I get to find a Pokemon-human hybrid?
yes, indeed, and just wait till you get your bike fixed, because after you go to the desert,
That's the boat!
yes, you come across the boat that Shadow Lugia dropped at the beginning of the game. Apparently, it was carrying Shadow Pokemon to the nearby Pokemon Lab, where they are artificially closing the door to Pokemon's heart in an assembly line type manner.
Like, one thing that I don't get about this game is the developer's intention towards the atmosphere. Like, one minute it's this dark and brooding story, and then the next minute I'm chasing a Bonsly around a cruise ship.
Yes, Pokemon XD actually marks the first appearance of Bonsly in video games, and is actually playable in the Battle Bingo mode at the Relgam Tower. Pokemon XD also showed Munchlax for the first time in a game. Now, we had seen Munchlax in the anime prior to this, but his first appearance in a video game is nice to see, unless he's stealing your Pokesnacks like the little bastard that he is. Speaking of bastards, if you like Team Snagem, then they're back at it again from the first game, showing off the Pokemon Universe's version of Chloroform and stealing your Snag Machine. Now, honestly, I would love to say this segment is really cool as you get to go infiltrate their hideout to get your Snag Machine back, but Shadow Pokemon still keep popping up. Now, I do understand that they wanted to show that Mirror B has the Shadow Pokemon that you've missed, but this just aggravates me. When the most fun part of the game is taken away, even if just for a brief moment, I just feel disserviced as a player. Hey look, Johnny Bravo is back. The Cipher Key Lair. Honestly, this part is fairly boring. It's just a gauntlet to get to the top floor. Trainers start having 2 Shadow Pokemon, and anytime you need to rest, you have to go all the way back to the beginning of the lair to heal your Pokemon. And this dude just looks like he can't decide whether he's a biker or a UFC fighter. At least there are some cool battles to take place, and after taking down Goggles here, we find out that Mr. Varich is actually the true mastermind behind all of Cipher.
Oh, wow, damn, that's so unexpected. I never saw that coming.
I do find it kind of odd that they retconned the events of Pokemon Colosseum, as they stated that Evis was nearly a scapegoat, and that Varich is the true mastermind behind everything. But at least it doesn't make it too confusing for those that didn't play the original game, and 15 years later, I think that's a fair consensus. Now I hope you didn't forget about Robo-Groudon, because Robo-Kyogre is the true key to getting to the final hideout of Cipher, Citadel Isle, where one final challenge awaits us, taking on the massive army that Cipher has created.
Remember when I said that the pacing of XD was so much better? It is, but I hope you like an onslaught of enemies for the next 5 hours, because that's exactly what you're going to be doing here on Citadel Isle.
Citadel Isle is enemy after enemy after enemy. It is one single path littered with Shadow Pokemon that feels like it goes on forever. Most of the grind involves choosing the right path that never amounts to anything more than go the correct way, fight another enemy, and then backtrack 2 floors to heal your Pokemon because there's barely any healing PCs. But Xalem, you say?
What?
Aren't there some fun and engaging puzzles that challenge you to find the correct way to go? And sure there are! Those are few in number compared to the utter waste of time some of these puzzles actually are. This one is literally just falling through the floor. Every time I play this game, I spend 4 hours at least battling enemy after enemy just to get to the final leg of this game. But it's still completely worth it. Here we are! The final showdown with Master Greevil standing face to face with the legendary Lugia. Yeah, that's not the end of the game. Greevil is a major improvement over Evis from the previous game. He has 6 Shadow Pokemon, including all 3 of the legendary birds. Now, the fight itself isn't that difficult, but the strategy of trying to catch every single Pokemon is such a challenging yet rewarding battle that's sure to test even Pokemon veterans like myself.
Which, if you can do this, major props to you.
With Greevil defeated, the lesson is learned. The world is celebrating with joy as the clouds surrounding Citadel Isle have been cleared, and Jovi, why are you still shaking my hand?
But now we get to do the after story and see everything that the post game has to offer. I'm gonna be honest, Pokemon Colosseum did this a lot better.
We can go to the Orre Colosseum and have your standard bracket-style, no-items tournament that we've experienced from the Stadium games on the Nintendo 64. And these battles can be excruciating, definitely some of the toughest strategies you'll be using in the entire game. But if that's not your style, then of course you can gather and purify all these Shadow Pokemon, 83 in total. Lugia can only be purified by maxing out every slot in the Purify Chamber, and if you're successful, congratulations, you have the legendary beast. But once you've beaten the game, there's not much to do. The only Pokemon that you can get in the post-game is Dragonite after capturing all of the Shadow Pokemon. You can do Battle Bingo, a game where you rent out a Pokemon and try to complete a bingo card in return for battle points where you can buy rare battle items. But I think the most fun comes from Battle Sims, a strategy game where you're given a specific scenario and have to learn how to overcome it. There are 50 of these battle CDs to collect, and each one has some sort of challenge to use advanced competitive techniques to overcome each CD.
And that's Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, the long-awaited sequel to its predecessor, Pokemon Colosseum. And do I think that this is an improvement over the first title? Yeah.
Sure, you could call me a little biased because I've played this game a lot, but Gale of Darkness feels like a lot smoother experience than Colosseum. Sure, it might not have as dark of a storyline, but the game consistently stays interesting enough to keep me wanting to come back to play more. During the entirety of the story, there's always something new happening, with new developments in every location, and characters within these locations adding a wider range of depth that Colosseum laid the foundation for. These two games are both far from perfect, but do an excellent job of putting a twist on the now timeless formula that Pokemon games have managed to create. These games are nearly 15 years old and still hold their own in comparison to Pokemon's recent titles. And if you have a GameCube or have any other totally not illegal method of playing these games that I totally don't condone with a sarcastic tone, I highly recommend you trying them out.
And that makes 2 games in the bag, both fantastic experiences that I love very dearly. But now it's on to complete the 3rd game in the series, what I consider to be the best one yet, and that would be Pokemon... Wait a minute.
And that concludes our report on the mysterious creatures that are half bug, half snack. Tune in next week for a brand
Nintendo, bring back Pokemon Colosseum!
Do you see what I have to work with? This is why I need to get to a better news station. Nothing, dear.